The year was 2147, and the Valo Corridor Refugee Station floated in the darkness between dying stars. Park Junho walked through the crowded hallways of Section 9 with a medical kit over his shoulder and exhaustion written across his face. He had been awake for 36 hours, but there were always more patients, and he could not bring himself to rest. When children still cried in the temporary shelters, the station held over 200,000 refugees from 12 different star systems, and all of them had lost something in the Dominion Collapse War. Some had lost their homes, and some had lost their families, and some had lost entire worlds. Junho understood their pain because he had lost his wife 3 years ago when the Dominion attacked the Earth colony, where they had built their small clinic together. Now he worked for the United Earth Relief Corps, and he tried to heal others because he could not heal himself. He was 34 years old, with tired eyes and gentle hands, and a reputation for never turning away any patient regardless of their species. The refugees called him the kind human, and they trusted him even when they trusted no one else. On this particular evening, he was delivering medicine to the overflow shelters in the cargo bay. Massive space had been converted into a temporary home for thousands of beings, and the air smelled of recycled oxygen and shared despair. Junho handed out supplies and checked on the sick and spoke soft words to frightened children in 4 different alien languages that he spoke poorly but sincerely. He was about to leave when he heard something, a small sound beneath the rumble of ventilation systems and the murmur of countless voices. It was crying, not the open crying of a child seeking comfort, but the quiet, desperate crying of someone trying not to be found. Junho followed the sound past rows of sleeping families and around mountains of collapsed cargo containers. The crying grew louder as he walked deeper into the shadows of the storage area, and then he found her. She was huddled in a dark corner behind rusted metal crates, and she was so small that he almost missed her. Child with pale blue skin and silver eyes that caught the dim light like mirrors. She had 4 fingers on each hand, and her clothes had once been fine with delicate embroidery that now hung in torn and dirty rags. She looked up at him with terror in those strange, beautiful eyes. Junho knelt down slowly so he would not frighten her further. "Hello, little one," he said in a soft voice. "I am not going to hurt you." She did not understand his words, but something in his tone made her stop crying. Could see that she was malnourished, with hollow cheeks and trembling limbs. In her small hand she clutched a broken pendant with a symbol he did not recognize. Junho removed his jacket and wrapped it around her thin shoulders. She flinched at first, but then she leaned into the warmth, and her silver eyes never left his face. "Let me help you," he said, and he opened his arms. She hesitated for a long moment, and then she reached for him, picked her up, and she weighed almost nothing, and she buried her face against his chest like a child who had forgotten what safety felt like. Junho carried her through the cargo bay, and the refugees watched him pass with strange expressions. Some looked away quickly, and some whispered to each other, and some stared at the child with something that might have been fear or might have been awe. He did not understand their reactions, but he did not stop to ask. The medical bay was bright and clean, and Dr. Chen looked up in surprise when Junho entered with the child in his arms. "Where did you find her?" she asked. "Hiding in the cargo section," he replied. She was alone. Dr. Chen ran her scanner over the child and frowned at the results. "I have never seen this species before," she said. "There is no match in our database." The child watched them with those silver eyes, and she still clutched the broken pendant. "Check the arrival records," Junho said. Someone must have brought her here, but the records showed nothing, and no transport had carried passengers of her species, and no one had reported a missing child. She was a mystery wrapped in torn silk and held together by a broken piece of jewelry. Junho stayed with her through the night, while she slept in the medical bay. When she woke screaming from nightmares, he held her hand until she calmed. The next day he asked everyone he met if they knew anything about her, but they Answers were always silence or shaking heads. It was Commodore Vask who finally gave him something more than nothing. Vask was a Kreth diplomat with scales, the color of old bronze, and eyes that had seen too many wars. He had come to the station seeking asylum after his government fell, and he spent his days playing strategy games alone in the common area. And when Junho showed him the pendant, the old reptilian face went pale. "Where did you get this?" Vask demanded. "From a child," Junho said. "A little girl with blue skin and silver eyes." Vask looked around as if checking for listeners, and then he leaned close. "You should not have found her," he whispered. "For your own sake, you should pretend you never did." "Why?" Junho asked. "Who is she?" But Vask would say no more, and he walked away with fear in his ancient eyes. That evening, Junho returned to the medical bay and found the child awake. She looked at him, and she tried to speak, but her language was nothing he had ever heard, so he pointed to himself and said his name slowly, "Junho." She tried to repeat it, and the sounds came out wrong, but she tried again and again. Then he pointed to her and waited. She shook her head, because she did not understand, or because she had no name to give. So Junho thought for a moment, and then he said a word in Korean, "Yuna." He told her, "It means grace." She repeated the name, and this time the sound was perfect. "Yuna," she said, and for the first time since he found her, she smiled. That night, Junho sat by her bed and taught her simple words: apple, and water, and hand. And friend, she learned them faster than any child he had ever known. And her silver eyes glowed softly when she was happy. He was just starting to teach her the word for star when the station alarms began to scream. Junho ran to the nearest viewport, and his blood went cold. 3 unmarked ships had appeared at the edge of sensor range, and they were heading straight for the station. Something was coming for the lost child he had found, and Junho knew in his heart that he would not let them take her. 3 weeks passed, and the unmarked ships did not attack. They simply watched from the darkness, like predators waiting for the right moment to strike. Inside the station, life continued, and Junho found himself becoming something he never expected to be. He became a father. Yuna followed him everywhere now, and she held his hand during his medical rounds, and she tried to help him stack supplies with her small four-fingered hand. She learned Korean faster than should have been possible, and within days she was speaking in full sentences. Within weeks, she was telling him about her dreams in words that made his heart ache. She dreamed of fire and screaming, and hands reaching for her in the dark. She dreamed of a woman with silver eyes like hers, who told her to run and never stop running. Junho held her when she woke from these nightmares, and he promised her that she was safe now, but he was not sure he could keep that promise. The other children on the station avoided Yuna, and their parents pulled them away when she tried to play. At first, Junho thought it was simple xenophobia, but then he saw what happened in the cafeteria. A BN group of older boys had cornered Yuna, and they were pushing her and calling her names she did not understand. She fell to the ground, and she was so frightened that something inside her broke open. Every tray in the cafeteria flew off the tables at once, and the boys were thrown backward by an invisible force. Yuna sat on the floor crying, and she did not understand what she had done. Junho rushed to her side and wrapped his arms around her and told her it was okay. But the looks on the faces around them told a different story. They were afraid of her now, and fear made people dangerous. The watching ships finally made their move on the 23rd day. A shuttle descended from the largest vessel, and it bore the markings of the Sirath. Hegemon Yu. Junho had heard of the Sirath during the war, and none of what he heard was good. They were conquerors who dressed their cruelty in the language of order and civilization. Their delegation marched onto the station with the confidence of beings who had never been told. Node leader was a tall creature in black armor with eyes like burning coals and a voice that demanded obedience. He called himself I Sentinel Kryn, and he requested an immediate meeting with station leadership. Junho watched from the crowd as Commander Torres met with the Sirath in the main hall. "We are searching for stolen property," Kryn announced to the gathered crowd, a valuable asset that was taken from Sirith territory. He raised his hand, and a holographic image appeared in the air. It was Yuna Junho, felt his heart stop, and then start again with painful force. This creature is dangerous. Kryn continued. It must be returned to us for proper containment. Commander Torres studied the image with careful eyes. We have many refugees on this station, she said. I cannot simply hand over a child without proper documentation. Documentation. Kryn repeated, and his voice dripped with contempt. This is not a child, and it is not a refugee, and Earth law does not apply to Sirith property. On this station, Earth law is the only law, Torres replied. If you want this child, you will need to go through proper channels. Kryn smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. We will discuss proper channels then, he said. In private. The crowd dispersed, but Junho did not move. He needed answers, and there was only one person who might give them. Commodore Vask was in his usual spot in the common area, but he was not playing games today. He sat staring at nothing with the look of someone remembering horrors. Tell me, Junho said as he sat across from the old diplomat. Tell me who she is. Vask was silent for a long time. If I tell you, then you will be in danger. He finally said, I'm already in danger, Junho replied. She is already in danger, and I cannot protect her if I do not understand. Vask closed his ancient eyes, and when he opened them, they were full of grief. She is the last of the Aetheri, he said, the sole surviving heir of a dynasty that once united 40 star systems in peace. He told Junho everything the Aetheri had ruled for 1,000 years through wisdom and service, and their bloodline carried gifts that no other species possessed. They could move objects with their minds, and heal wounds with their touch, and see truths that others could not see. But their power made them targets, and 20 years ago the Sirith had betrayed them. They had murdered the royal family in a single night of blood and fire, and they had hunted every survivor across the galaxy. Her grandmother was the last empress. Vask said, her mother was the crown princess, and she died getting that child off their homeworld. Why do the Sirith fear her so much? Junho asked. She is just a child. She is a symbol, Vask replied. If she lives to adulthood, she could rally the old alliance, and the Sirith would face enemies on every border. He leaned forward with urgency in his voice. They will never stop hunting her, and anyone who stands in their way will be destroyed. Junho thought about his small clinic on the colony world where his wife had died. He thought about all the patients he had lost, and all the ones he had saved. He thought about a little girl with silver eyes who called him by name and smiled when he taught her new words. Then I will stand in their way, he said. The next day, the Sirith made their offer to station leadership. They would provide supply contracts worth billions of credits, and they would guarantee the safety of all refugees. All they wanted in return was one small child. The council debated for hours, and some argued that the needs of many outweighed the needs of one. Junho requested permission to speak, and Commander Torres granted it. Stood before the council with nothing but his words and his conviction. She is a child, he said. She has no throne, and she has no army, and she has no power except what we give her. He looked at each council member in turn. The Sirith murdered her family, and they have hunted her across the stars, and now they ask us to hand her over like property. His voice did not waver. I did not survive the war to become the kind of person who gives children to their killers, and I do not believe any of you want to be that person either. The vote was close, but in the end, they chose to protect. High Sentinel Kryn received the news with cold fury. That night, Junho moved Yuna to a hidden compartment in the old maintenance sector. He made her a bed from blankets, and he left her with food and water and a communicator. I will come back, he promised. I will always come back. She hugged him tight, and she whispered a word she had learned just for him. Appa, she said. It meant father, and Corinne. Junho held her close, and he made a silent vow that he would die before he let anyone take Huron, the Sirith flagship. High Sentinel. Kryn watched hidden camera footage of the human carrying the child through dark corridors. "How touching," he said to his officers. "The human thinks he can hide her from me." He gave the order to prepare for assault. The hunt was about to begin. The blockade began at dawn. Station time. Sirith warships surrounded Velar Station in a ring of metal and weapons, and nothing could enter or leave without their permission. High Sentinel Kryn. Broadcast his demands every hour on every frequency. Surrender. The E3 child and your station will be resupplied and protected. Refuse and you will learn the cost of defying the hegemony. The first day passed without incident, and people hoped that maybe it was only a threat. The second day, the supply ships stopped coming, and the third day, the water recyclers began to strain by. The end of the first week, fear had taken root in the hearts of everyone on board. Junho watched the growing panic, and he knew that fear would destroy them faster than any weapon. He gathered a small group of trusted people in an empty storage room. There was Dr. Chan, who had treated Yuna on that first night, and Officer Reyes, who had served with Junho during the war. There was Commodore Vask, who knew the enemy better than anyone, and there was a Kreth engineer named Torak, who could build anything from scraps. "We cannot wait for rescue," Junho told them. "We have to protect ourselves." "How?" Reyes asked. "We have no weapons and no soldiers, and no way to fight a fleet. We have 200,000 people." Junho replied, "Refugees from a dozen worlds who have survived wars and invasions and the death of everything they loved." He looked at each of them in turn. "We have engineers and doctors and teachers and former soldiers, and if we work together, we can hold this station until help arrives." "What help?" Dr. Chan asked. "Who would come for us?" Vask spoke up with a voice that carried the weight of old memories. "The E3 Alliance," he said. "It was broken, but not destroyed, and there are still those who remember what the Sirith did. Them we need to tell them." Junho said, "We need to tell the whole galaxy." They spent the next 3 days preparing. Junho organized the refugees into teams, and he assigned tasks based on skills and strengths. Former soldiers trained others in basic defense, and engineers reinforced critical sections. Doctors set up emergency stations throughout the station, and teachers kept the children calm with lessons and stories. Every person had a job, and every job mattered. And slowly the fear began to turn into something else. It became determination. Junho visited Yuna every night in her hiding place. He brought her food and books, and he told her about the people working to protect her. She listened with those silver eyes that seemed to understand more than any child should. "Are they going to hurt you?" she asked one night. "I will not let them," he said. "But what if they do?" she pressed. "What if they hurt you because of me?" Junho took her hands in his. "Yuna, listen to me," he said. "You are not the reason bad things happen, and you are not responsible for what evil people choose to do." He squeezed her fingers gently. "I protect you because you deserve to be protected, and because it is the right thing to do, and I would make the same choice 1,000 times. She hugged him, and he felt her tears against his shirt. "I love you, Appa." She whispered. "I love you too," he said, and he meant it more than he had ever meant anything. On the 10th day of the blockade, the Sirith attacked. They breached the station through a cargo airlock on the lower levels, and armored soldiers poured into the corridors. The station defenders met them with improvised weapons and desperate courage. Junho led a group of 30 volunteers to hold the main corridor leading to the residential sections. They fought with metal pipes and emergency tools, and pure stubborn refusal to surrender. The Sirith had superior weapons and training, but the defenders knew every corner of their home. They used the ventilation shafts and maintenance tunnels, and they struck from shadows before disappearing again. Battle lasted 6 hours, and it was the longest night of Junho's life. 7 humans died defending that corridor, and 12 aliens died beside Theme, Kreth grandmother charged the Sirith soldier with nothing but a cooking knife, and she took him down. Before she fell, a young man from Mars blocked a doorway with his own body so that children could escape. They were not soldiers, but they fought like heroes because they had something worth fighting for. Sirith retreated at dawn, but everyone knew they would return. Junho was checking on the wounded when the alarm came through his communicator. Someone had found the hiding place. He ran through the corridors with his heart pounding, and he burst into the maintenance sector to find chaos. As Sirith soldier had cornered Yuna against a wall, and his weapon was raised, and his finger was on the trigger. Junho shouted and charged forward, but he knew he would be too late. Then Yuna screamed. The sound was not just noise, but something more, and the air itself seemed to shatter. A wave of invisible force exploded outward from her small body, and the soldier flew backward through the metal wall. The impact shook the entire section, and lights flickered, and alarms wailed. Yuna collapsed to the ground, and Junho caught her before she hit. She was breathing but unconscious, and her skin was pale even by her standards. He carried her to Dr. Chun, who examined her with trembling hands. Her brain activity is off the charts, Chun said. Whatever she did, it nearly killed her, but it saved us. Vask said quietly. The E3 gifts have awakened, and she is more powerful than we imagined. That night, Vask made a broadcast. He used old codes and forgotten frequencies that only certain receivers would recognize. His message went out across the galaxy to scattered ships and hidden colonies and forgotten outposts. The E3 bloodline lives, he said. The last heir survives on Velar Station, and she is protected by a human who stands against the Sirith alone. He paused, and his old voice filled with emotion. You swore oaths to her grandmother and her mother, and now I ask you to remember those oaths. The Sirith fear her because they know what she represents, and they will destroy her if we do not act. If any of you still believe in what the Alliance stood for, then come now. Come and show the galaxy that some promises are never broken. The message ended, and silence filled the station. Junho sat beside Yuna's bed and held her hand while she slept. He did not know if anyone had heard the message or if anyone would come. He only knew that he would keep fighting until there was nothing left to fight with. 3 days later, the station sensors detected incoming ships. Junho rushed to the command center and stared at the display with his breath caught in his throat. 7 different fleets approached from 7 different directions, and they flew banners that had not been seen in 20 years. The old Alliance had answered the call on his flagship, High Sentinel. Kryn watched the same display, and his coal-black eyes widened. Impossible, he whispered, but it was not impossible, and the proof was burning toward him through the darkness of space. The hunters had become the hunted. The battle for Velar Station lasted 4 hours. Junho watched from the observation deck as Alliance ships tore through the Sirith blockade like fire through paper. The enemy had grown arrogant in 20 years of victory, and they had forgotten what it meant to face a united force. Krith warships attacked from above, while Valorian cruisers struck from the flanks. Durrani fighters swarmed like angry insects, and Nethian destroyers cut off every escape route. At the center of it all flew a single vessel bearing the silver tree symbol of the Aetheri dynasty. It was old and scarred, but it moved with deadly grace. High Sentinel. Kryn ordered a full retreat, but only his flagship escaped. The rest of the Sirith fleet burned in the darkness between stars. When the last enemy ship vanished into hyperspace, a cheer rose from every section of the station. People who had spent weeks in fear embraced each other and wept with relief. Junho felt hands slapping his back and voices calling him a hero. But he did not feel like one. He only felt tired and grateful and desperate to see. Yunash was awake when he reached the medical bay, and her silver eyes lit up when she saw him. Appa, she cried, and she threw her arms around his neck. He held her tight and let his own tears fall. It's over, he whispered. We're safe now. But he knew it was not truly over, and the hardest part was still to come. The Alliance leaders came aboard the station the next morning. There were 7 of them, representing 7 species that had once followed the E3 into an age of peace. Admiral Cross of the Krath, war medals from 100 battles, and General Sin of the Valorians moved with the quiet grace of a predator. High Priestess Mora of the Tyranny carried a staff that glowed with inner light, and Chancellor Ven of the Nethians watched everything with calculating eyes. 3 others stood with them, representing peoples whose names Junho did not know. They walked through the station corridors with ceremony and purpose, and refugees bowed as they passed. Commander Torres led them to the council chamber, where Junho waited with Yuna at his side. The child clutched his hand and pressed close to his leg. She did not understand who these strangers were, or why everyone looked at them with such awe. The Alliance leaders stopped before her, and then one by one they knelt. Admiral Cross bowed his scaled head until it nearly touched the floor. General Sin placed her weapon on the ground in surrender. High Priestess Mora spoke words in a language that made Yuna's eyes widen with recognition. "Rise, daughter of the Silver Throne," she said. "Your people have waited long for your return." Yuna looked up at Junho with confusion and fear. "Appa, what are they doing?" she asked in Korean. "They are honoring you," he replied softly. Chancellor Ven rose and addressed Junho directly. "You are the human who protected her," he said. "We owe you a debt that can never be repaid." "I did not do it for payment," Junho said. "We know," Ven replied. "That is why the debt is so great." The leaders explained what Yuna was and what she could become. Her bloodline was not just royal, but chosen through ancient traditions that combined service and wisdom and sacrifice. Her grandmother had united 40 systems by earning the trust of each one. Her mother would have continued that legacy if the Sirith had not destroyed everything. Now Yuna was the last hope for an alliance that had spent 20 years in hiding. "We ask your permission to take her," Admiral Cross said. "She must be trained in the ways of her people and prepared for the role she was born to fill." Yuna's grip on Junho's hand tightened until it hurt. He looked down at her and saw the terror in her silver eyes. She had lost everyone she loved, and now strangers wanted to take her away from the only safety she had found. Junho faced the Alliance leaders with a calm he did not feel. "No," he said. The word hung in the air like a challenge. Admiral Cross frowned, and Chancellor Ven's eyes narrowed. "You refuse?" General Sin asked with surprise in her voice. "I do not refuse her destiny," Junho said. "I refuse your timeline." He stepped forward, still holding Yuna's hand. "She is a child," he said. "She is 5 years old, and she has watched her family die and fled across the galaxy and nearly burned herself out saving this station." His voice grew stronger with each word. "She does not need a throne right now, and she does not need training, and she does not need the weight of 40 star systems on her small shoulders." He looked at each leader in turn. "She needs a home, and she needs time to grow, and she needs someone to teach her what it means to be loved without conditions." High Priestess Mora studied him with ancient eyes. "And you would be that someone?" she asked. "I would," Junho replied. "I will raise her as my daughter, and I will teach her kindness and wisdom and strength." He squeezed Yuna's hand gently. "When she is old enough to understand what you are asking, then she will make her own choice. And I will support whatever she decides. But until that day, she belongs with me." Silence filled the chamber. The Alliance leaders exchanged glances that carried conversations. Junho could not read. Finally, Admiral Cross laughed, and it was a warm sound full of genuine amusement. "Humans," he said, "you protect children, even from the stars themselves." High Priestess Mora nodded slowly. "The E3 chose their rulers not by blood alone, but by the quality of those who shaped them," she said. "Perhaps there is wisdom in your way, human." Alliance agreed to Junho's terms. They would wait, and they would watch, and when Yuna came of age, they would return for her answer. Until then, she would live as his daughter and learn as he taught. Junho took Yuna to a quiet colony world where a small Korean community had built homes among green hills and clear streams. They lived in a simple house with a garden in front and mountains behind. He taught her to read in Korean and English, and eventually in the ethery tongue that the Alliance provided. He taught her to cook the foods his mother had made, and he told her stories about Earth and its long history. Taught her to plant seeds and tend growing things, and he explained that good rulers were like gardeners who helped others grow. She went to school with human children, and at first they were afraid of her differences, but she won them over with kindness and patience, and soon she had friends who did not care about the color of her skin or the shape of her hands. Years passed like water flowing over stones. Yuna grew tall and graceful, and her silver eyes carried wisdom beyond her years. She read everything she could find about her people's history, and she asked Junho endless questions about leadership and justice and the nature of power. Why did the Sirith betray my family? She asked one evening when she was 15. Fear, Junho replied. They feared what your family represented, and they thought that destroying you would make them safe. Were they wrong? She asked. Fear is always wrong when it leads to cruelty. He said, your grandmother built her alliance through trust, and the Sirith broke the galaxy when they broke that trust. Yuna was quiet for a long time. I do not want to rule through fear. She finally said, I want to build something like grandmother did. Junho smiled at her with pride filling his heart. Then you will be a great leader someday. On her 18th birthday, Yuna woke before dawn and walked to the garden. Junho found her there with her face turned toward the sky. They are coming, she said. I can feel them. He stood beside her and looked up at the stars that were just beginning to fade. Are you ready? He asked. She took his hand like she had done so many times before. I am ready because of you, she said. You taught me that power is nothing without love, and that thrones mean nothing without service. Ships appeared in the morning sky, bearing the banners of 7 peoples. The Alliance had come for her answer. Junho walked beside his daughter toward the waiting shuttle. His hair was gray now, and lines marked his face, but his eyes were still kind. He had never remarried, and he had never regretted a single moment of the life they had built together. Whatever you choose, he told her, I will be proud of you. She smiled at him with all the grace of her name. I know Appa, she said. I have always known. The Alliance flagship was larger than some cities, and Yuna walked its halls with Junho beside her. Dignitaries from 100 worlds had gathered in the great chamber to hear her decision. They came from systems she had only read about in books, and they wore the symbols of people she had never met. All of them watched the young woman with silver eyes who carried the hopes of 40 star systems. Yuna wore simple clothes because she had refused the ceremonial robes they offered. I will not dress like a queen until I have earned the right, she told him. Junho smiled when he heard those words because they were exactly what he had taught her. They walked together toward the great doors that led to the council chamber, and Alliance guards bowed as they passed. High Priestess Mora waited at the entrance with a crown in her ancient hands. It was a simple circlet of silver metal that caught the light like captured starfire. Your grandmother wore this crown, Mora said, and her mother before her, and her mother before that. It is not mine yet. Yuna replied gently. The doors opened and 1,000 faces turned toward Hirsch, stepped into the chamber, and the silence was so complete that she could hear her own heartbeat. She was halfway to the speaking platform when the lights went out. Chaos erupted in the darkness, and screams filled the air. Emergency lights flickered on to reveal armored figures pouring through hidden passages. They wore black and carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy. High Sentinel Kryn had spent 20 years planning this moment. He had placed spies in the Alliance and sleeper agents among the servants, and he had waited for the perfect opportunity. Now he strode into the chamber with murder in his burning eyes. Did you think I would let her take the throne? He shouted. Did you think I would watch my life's work crumble? Alliance guards rushed to defend the dignitaries, but the assassins moved with terrible precision. Junho grabbed Yuna and pushed her behind a pillar as weapons fire scorched the air around them. "Stay down," he ordered. "Appa, we have to help them," she cried. "You have to survive," he said. "That is more important than anything else." Kryn's soldiers cut through the defenders with brutal efficiency. They were not here to take prisoners, and they were not here to negotiate. They had come to end the E3 line forever. Kryn himself advanced toward the pillar where Yuna hid. "Come out, little princess," he called. "Your grandmother begged for mercy before I killed her, and I want to see if you will do the same." Yuna's hands trembled, but her eyes were steady. "I will not beg," she said. "Then you will simply die," Kryn replied. He raised his weapon and aimed at the pillar. Junho saw the shot coming, and he did not think and he did not hesitate. Stepped in front of his daughter just as the energy blast fired. The impact threw him backward, and pain exploded through his chest. He hit the ground hard, and the world became a blur of light and shadow. Yuna screamed and dropped to her knees beside him. "Appa, no," she sobbed. "No, please, no." Junho looked up at her, and even through the agony he managed to smile. "I found you in the dark," he whispered. "I would do it again." Blood pooled beneath him, and his vision began to fade. Kryn laughed and raised his weapon for a final shot. "How touching," he sneered. "The human dies for nothing." Something changed in Yuna's eyes. The grief became something else, and the fear transformed into something ancient and terrible, and beautiful power erupted from her like a sun being born. It filled the chamber with silver light, and every assassin froze where they stood. Kryn tried to fire his weapon, but his arm would not obey. He tried to speak, but his voice had been talking. Yuna rose to her feet, and the light poured from her in waves that did not burn. She walked toward Kryn, and the crowd watched in awe. "You killed my grandmother," she said, and her voice echoed with harmonics that were not quite human. "You killed my mother and my father and everyone I loved." She stood before him, and her silver eyes blazed with power that could have torn him apart. "I should destroy you," she said. "I have the power and I have the right." Kryn's eyes widened with terror. "But my father taught me something you never learned," Yuna continued. "He taught me that mercy is not weakness, and that justice is not the same as revenge." She reached out and touched Kryn's forehead. The light flared and then faded. Kryn collapsed to the ground unconscious, but alive. His soldiers fell with him, and the threat was ended without a single death. Yuna turned and ran back to Junho, knelt beside him and placed her hands on his wound. The power that had stopped an army now focused on the one person she loved most. Light flowed into him, and the wound began to close color, returned to his face, and his breathing steadied. He opened his eyes and saw his daughter glowing like a star above him. "Yuna," he whispered. "Rest, Appa," she said. "I am here and everything is going to be all right." She healed him completely with power she had not known she possessed. When she finished, she helped him to his feet, and together they faced the watching crowd. Dignitaries and guards and servants all stared at her with expressions of wonder. High Priestess Mora approached with the silver crown still in her hands. "You have shown us what kind of ruler you would be," she said. "Will you accept the crown?" Yuna looked at Junho, and he nodded with pride shining in his eyes. She took a deep breath and turned to address the assembly. "My father is not ethery," she said. "He is a human who found a lost child in a refugee camp and gave her everything he had." Her voice carried to every corner of the great chamber. "He taught me that power means nothing without compassion, and that thrones are earned through service, not conquest." She looked at the crown in Mora's hands. "I will accept this crown not because I want power, but because I want to protect others the way he protected me." She knelt and Mora placed the circlet on her head. "Rise, Empress Yuna the Kind," Mora proclaimed. "First of her name and last of the old blood." Yuna rose, and the crowd erupted in cheers that shook the walls. She was 18 years old, and she held the fate of 40 star systems in her hands, but she was not afraid because she had been raised by a man who taught her that love was stronger than any weapon. The years that followed became legend. Empress Yuna rebuilt the alliance and brought peace to systems that had known only war. She invited humanity to join as full partners, and Earth's representatives were welcomed into every council. The seat reserved for human delegates was called the Park Chair, in honor of a medic who had changed history with nothing but kindness. Yuna ruled with wisdom and compassion, and she never forgot where she came from. She visited refugee stations and held the hands of lost children and told them that they mattered. She faced enemies with mercy when she could and strength when she must. She became everything her father had hoped she would. Junho lived another 30 years in the gardens of the Imperial Palace. He refused every title and every honor they tried to give him. He said he was just a gardener who liked to watch things grow, but everyone knew the truth and everyone respected him for choosing simplicity over glory. He died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 80. Yuna was at his bedside holding his hand as he passed. His last words were the same ones he had spoken to a frightened child so many years ago. "I will always come back," she declared. A day of mourning across 47 star system ships dimmed their lights and planets lowered their flags, and billions of beings paused to remember a human who had found a lost child in the dark. His grave stood in the palace garden beneath a tree from Earth. The stone was simple because he would have wanted it that way. The words carved upon it said everything that needed to be said. He found the lost. He healed the broken. He raised the stars. Yuna visited his grave every year on the anniversary of the day he found her. She would sit beside the stone and tell him about her work and her struggles and her hopes. She would thank him for making her who she was, and sometimes when the wind blew through the garden, she could almost hear his voice. "I am proud of you, daughter. I have always been proud of you." The story of Park Junho and Empress Yuna spread across the galaxy. It was told in schools and sung in songs and remembered by peoples who had never known either of them. It became proof that one person could change history, not with weapons or armies or power, but with kindness and courage and the simple choice to protect someone who needed help. The stars remembered a medic who gave everything for a child he did not have to save, and they never forgot that humanity's greatest gift was not strength or technology. It was the stubborn refusal to abandon anyone to the dark.